grateful for those. I'm grateful for those who are present with us, even though distantly. We're really excited today to have Ramona as our guest speaker. Now that she has stepped down as president, we're putting her to work right away. But we're excited to hear her talk about a Green River fossil adventure, Eocene fossils of Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. And we'll go ahead and let her get started, and people can join in as they log on. And Ramona, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to, Mike, are you going to give me control of the screen, or do you just want to do it from your end?
I made you co-host.
Okay.
You should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, I have to find screen sharing. There it is.
All right.
All right. Well, as Terry already alluded to, the topic of this is more like a road trip than a formal scientific presentation. And it reports on a 7-day adventure I had with my brother and some friends collecting the Green River fossils, the Green River Formation in Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. This is a world famous Lagerstätten. I'm sure you're all aware of it. And as I said, we did this for about 7 days near the end of June in 2019. And it was a pretty great adventure. We did a circular path you can see through here, starting in Kennemer and traveling over to Eden, Wamsutter. So here we're in Wyoming, come down into Colorado, and then ended in Vernal, Utah. And this route was specifically taken so that we would hit all 3 of those ancient lakes of the Eocene period. And before we even got to fossil hunting, my brother and I were driving down the road in Wyoming at 70 miles an hour, as you do, because that's the speed limit. And we zipped past this post because there are no trees. You can see here in the back, or you can see in the background there, that those are really just shrubs. So there's not a whole lot for birds to sit on, and we're zipping down the highway, and like I'm in the passenger seat, and I literally yell at him to stop and turn around because there were 2 eagles. By the time we got back, there was only 1 eagle left, but it was pretty astonishing to see that. So to get back to the stuff that's more interesting to you, the Eocene green, okay, gosh, there's a lot going on my screen. The Eocene Green River sediments were formed at the bottom of mountain lakes in 3 basins along what is today's Green River. And when you look at the material, you can see that the material is in layers. And you have dark layers interspaced with light layers. And the dark layers are the growing season, and the light layer is the inorganic layer. So immediately you're going to understand that the dark layers are sandwiched between these light inorganic layers, and that's where the fossils are. And this is a continuous record. This cyclical deposition happened for 5 million years and was just stacked up layer and layer and layer upon layer in this Lagerstätten. And it includes a very interesting time frame in the Eocene when the Eocene transitioned from a moist period to a slightly drier period. The oldest known flying mammal, which is a fossil bat, is found there. There have been about 60 vertebrate taxa found, including 11 species of reptiles and a species of snake. Invertebrate fossils are also abundant, and plant fossils as well, and those you can freely collect. So one of the first places we stopped was Fossil Butte National Monument to see the kinds of fossils that can be had in this material. And it's just, you know, a little bit of the drool factor. You know, you can see, apologies for some of these, not so great, but the really large ferns down in the bottom right-hand corner, and then in the upper left, you can see mortality plates that have multiple fishes preserved on them, and at the bottom, you see some of the larger fishes that are there. And in the bottom left, just you can see the outline of a stingray, a fossil stingray. Wait, I'm pretty sure there was another. Oh, nope. And then, of course, more wildlife. These are some of the things that you can see out the side of your car. This was a kind of antelope, a grazing animal, maybe a staghorn. I'm not 100% sure. But I really love the fact that it was standing there facing us right next to a tree. So our first stop was in Krailler, Wyoming. And here we visited a commercial quarries where you can legally collect vertebrate fossils from Fossil Lake. And you will remember that Fossil Lake is this little guy right here, right there in the far western side of the collection. And what you're able to do there's 6 feet of laminated blind mud, which you can split pretty easily. And this thin zone represents about 4,000 years of deposition. And there's an 18-inch unlaminated layer that contains unlaminated layers, the so-called 18-inch layer, that contains abundant fossils, but it's much harder to work. And this is where you find those really beautiful Diplomystis and Nidia fossils, fish fossils. And this is a pay-to-dig site, and you pay by the hour, and you can get 2 4 8-hour packages. And you can get access to the fossiliferous material, which has been, they've done some of the hard work for you. They've removed the stuff that isn't going to have any fossils, so you don't waste any time looking at that. And they give you the stuff that does have fossils in it. And they have tools there and table saws available so you can cut down your fines, so they're more easily transported. And you get to keep what you find. And my brother and I were there for only 4 hours each, but we found just a fabulous collection of fish. This one in the upper left-hand corner is the mortality plate with the 3 fishes on it is one that my brother Will found. And it's just one of our favorites. And what we found when we came home is that actually, as we continued to work some of these, more fish became visible and could be worked out of the stone. It was a lot of fun. And that was collecting on private property in a pay-per-dig site. And the rest of what we did was collecting on public lands. And as good fossil collectors, it's really important to know what the rules are there, and the rules are pretty easy. You can collect common invertebrate fossils for personal use. You can't barter or sell them. I have no idea what the view would be on gifting. Petrified wood may be collected up to 25 pounds, plus one ginormous log that you can take out that can weigh up to 225 pounds, because you can take a maximum of 250 pounds per person. And then vertebrate fossils, you can't take those on public land. They can only be collected by trained people. So if you find them, you have to leave them. So our second stop was on public lands on the shores of Lake Gosite. I'm not 100% sure of the pronunciation of this. And this is a very famous site. It's called the Blue Forest, and fossil wood has been collected from this site for hundreds of years. The fossilization process is really quite fascinating, and you can get petrified wood that's really quite gorgeous. So this wood was on this lake, and periodically the lakes would rise and dry out, rise and dry out. And during high lake levels, you would get muck growing, algae and cyanobacteria growing around all of the debris. And then when the lake levels would recede, these specimens would dry out. And eventually they became buried in lake sediment. And mineralization, or the process of diagenesis, occurred in 3 steps in this site. You first got silica replacement of the wood tissue, and then once the silicification process of the tissue occurred, at a later time you got precipitation of blue chalcedony into the spaces within the silicified wood, and at a later date you got precipitation and growth of crystalline calcite into any remaining void spaces. And you don't find all of that in every specimen, but but I am going to show you some specimens where you can see this. And when you think about what a desiccated encrusted specimen of a twig with loads of cyanobacteria and algae around it, it's kind of hard to imagine what that might look like. So if you would imagine this modern example of dead wood in the water with gunk growing on it, actually fossilizing. It's hard work. Here's a picture of my brother digging in a hole. There are small surface pieces that you can collect, but you are rewarded with some really beautiful material. And these are the specimens that illustrate the fossilization process on the left. And in the fossil on the right-hand side of the furthest of the left slide, you can see that there's one big chunk that's got a little tiny center blue piece. And then you've got all of the layered material around that blue piece. And that's the cyanobacteria or the algae. So that is actually stromatolites. That's fossil stromatolite from the Eocene period. And here, and in the center of that slide, you can see all 3 steps of the diagenesis to create this beautiful wood, this beautiful petrified wood. You can see the silicified wood, the blue chalcedony, and then the honey calcite. And in the slide on the right-hand side of your screen, what you see is just a lot of smaller pieces that were picked up on surface collecting, and you can see many of the same, all those same processes illustrated in those small pieces. It's just not quite as dramatic. So this was hard work, but it really did yield some beautiful fossils and more wildlife. The third site we stopped at was to collect freshwater Alimina tenera. Is that right? I have to look at my notes. On public lands. These snails once lived along the shore of Lake Gosite, and these fossils have been given out as store prizes several times over the course of the last year. And these are abundant. You can find a lot of really large pieces. This was the view we were looking at. You can see how just breathtaking it is. And this is a cut and polished slab of those freshwater snails or gastropods. And here's a little jar of individual molds, Steinkern, that I collected that I thought were very, very pretty. And then we went to Rangeley, Colorado, again to collect fossil plants and insects on public land. And I'm just going to say this was also some pretty tough fossil collecting. It was cold, it was windy. The land we were on was really steep. And we were collecting in the mahogany ledge strata of the Upper Parachute Creek member, and it really smells. When you strike it, you can smell the oil in the shale. It's really amazing. It's quite shocking. And so these fossils are about 48 billion years old, and this site was on the shores of ancient Lake Uinta. And this is, the view is on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is, you can get a sense of, there in the center you see a telephone pole. And so you can get a sense of how steep that was to hunt on. But again, we didn't get skunked. We did find some very nice things, and one of my favorite pieces from that day is in the picture on the left of your screen there, and you can see that it's got a really delicate leaf circled by the kind of yellowish circle, and it's got another leaf, only one side of it, one impression of it in the green circle, and then the red circle is something I don't know what it is. It's a blob, so it could be a lot of different things. And then on the other side, you just have some miscellaneous things that we found on that site that day. And our fifth stop was in Vernal, Utah, and much the same as the previous stop, to collect fossil plants and insects on public lands in that same formation, the Upper Parachute Creek member, and on the shores of ancient Lake Uinta. And literally there's Green River shale out there as far as the eye can see. It's just acres and acres and acres and acres of this shale. And so there's a lot to explore. And one of the things that we found the humans were not the only thing collecting fossil shale in this location, but we also had, I lost my notes on that, and a rodent that builds its dens out of sharp material, a midden out of sharp material, and it collected the shale to make it sharp. And from that collecting site, one of our favorite things on that day was this reed, and I apologies to the paleobotanists in the room because I don't know if that's really a reed. I know that it's a long skinny thing, a long skinny plant, and it's about 20 inches, nearly 20 inches long, and we chased that into the hillside. We got a little bit exposed and then just kept working it back and back and back and back. Probably went the other way, actually, now that I look at it, because here you can see that we got both sides of that. So we probably first detected it, right, I realize that you can't see my pointer. We probably first detected this fossil in the area that's in the right end of the fossil. And where it's more brown, then there's a lot of debris, and then we just followed it back into the hill, moving from your right to your left as you go down that reed. And then just as this is my own personal drool factor, the vast majority of what's in this bookcase is from the Eocene Green River Formation, and probably most of it is from that one trip with my brother and I. So it was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but we really did bring home some beautiful fossils from the presentation. And I would encourage anyone to explore these sites if they ever get a chance to. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Road trip.
Yeah.
We'll tack on Creed. We'll go to yours and then we'll pop down to Creed.
Okay.
Be fun.
That's a long trip.
It's a long trip, 2 weeks. Yep.
Did you manage to go to the museum in Vernal?
No, I don't think so.
It's really a treasure of a museum that might have shown, identifications for things that you found. It's just when you go back next time, that's a really good place to visit.
There are tons of resources available on the taxa in this formation. It's so widely studied, and I do occasionally break out the papers and look at them and try to start sorting through them. But it requires, I have to learn a whole new vocabulary to understand how to differentiate the diagnostic features. And so anyway, it was a lot of fun and beautiful material coming out of there. And I did see that somebody gave me a possible identification. I'm sure that was Dr. Mickle, yes, giving me a possible identification on that reed. Thank you.
Yeah, that reed could possibly be an equisetum. I've seen equisetum out of there, which is scouring rush.
Cool.
But I'd have to see it to get a good diagnosis on it.
And I hope someday you do get to see it.
Yeah.
Bruce, you have a question.
Yeah, were those 3 lakes saltwater or freshwater?
They were freshwater.
The reason I ask is I believe at one of the museums they had a fossil of a stingray.
Yes.
And most of the stingrays throughout history have been marine, so I was a little puzzled. Maybe you could shed some light on it.
I wish I could. I presume since they were freshwater lake, it was a freshwater lake, and there's a stingray, that this was a species of stingray or skate or something in that family, that cartilaginous fish family that thrived in freshwater. I'd have to. I can't tell you more than that. I would have to do a search.
That's fine.